Alix is going to say a few words and tell us a little bit about your work, please.
Sure. I wasn't exactly prepared today, as I wasn't planning on saying a lot of words, but I think that taking communication into the science realm is something that is not frequently done as often. We typically think of journalism or what Lori Matsukawa does, which is an incredible story. So I don't know how I'm going to follow that. But I think that, merging communication and science has taken me quite a while, and just kind of weaving my way through that and figuring that out. And when I was here, taking Professor Domke's course was amazing, mass communication. And he took something. No offense, I'm not as interested in politics, but you took something that I didn't think I would be interested in, and you made it so fascinating and so riveting. And I looked forward to class, and that wasn't is common with my calculus course or my chemistry course. And so, while I tried to get a broad liberal arts, degree here with communication and chemistry and everything else under the sun, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I wanted to follow that passion, but in communication, I didn't really know how to weave together, the science side of me and this communication side of me. So I went to Fred Hutch, and I worked with animals, and that was just so difficult. And yes, that kind of research is needed, but that wasn't for me. I worked with pediatric brain tumor, patients in neuro-oncology, and that wasn't for me. I went to graduate school for, cancer, and worked in the lab, and I loved that on the molecular side. But again, I was missing that communication aspect. And so, as I was graduating with my master's in molecular and cellular biology, I was talking a lot to my cells, my HeLa cells, and at the time I was reading that book about Henrietta Lacks. About her cells were taken from her in the 1950s, and the ethics of that and the communication about that, and communicating that story was so powerful. And so after that, I decided to look into clinical research and public health policy. And so I did clinical research, and that was communicating it and consenting patients, and I work specifically with children with special needs, and consenting them for research, and I really liked that, and I wanted to take it a step further. So I went to public health policy, and so I helped write evidence reviews for newborn genetic screening, and SCID, the bubble disease that we call it, which I didn't talk about before, but that was added to the recommended conditions because of something that I helped the committee see. And so we looked at an evidence review for this rare condition. It's very rare. And because of that, they decided to, the Secretary's Advisory Committee decided to, it was nominated, and they've added it to the board. So every child that is born in the US now is screened for SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency, because of the work that I did in communication writing that report. And so I think that that's really important to understand how communication is not just journalism, even though it's very important. And I watch the news every night, and I love it, and I make my decisions based on it, which way I'm going to drive to work and things like that. But on the other side, I think it's just so vital, in a communication sense. If we're talking about this is the century of communication, so much of what I do now is taking these really complex topics and breaking it down into these very simple bits, and so people can understand them, relate to them, and participate in them. And so a lot of that is what I'm doing now with the Football Players Health Study. And the player relations manager, or the player relations associate director position that I have now really focuses on looking at our population and working with our population very carefully, understanding, I'm very inspired by Dr. Phillipson's speech codes work. The work that he did, he in Chicago, it was America Backwards is what he called it. I'm not going to pronounce it because I would not do a good job at that. But he spoke a lot about that when I was here, about understanding these cultural codes and understanding the people, and I've taken that into our community with the former players and earned their trust. These former players, there's, concussion is a hot topic now, and they get letters every week, not just from the work that we're doing, but hundreds of studies, theses wanting, people from different schools want to go after them and see, and there's usually something in it for them. And so, our study is different in that we're partnering with former players. We have a former player advisory board. We have a family advisor board. And we really are listening to the former players. And a big part of that is the communication that we're doing with them to understand what's important to former players, not just the, professors at Harvard saying this is what, handing down, this is what we think is important, but really having this grassroots up. So we have a first questionnaire. It's the largest study of living former professional players. We're hovering around 3,000 participants so far. And what's really important about this is that we're taking what they are telling us what's important to them for joints and pain and mobility and heads, and we're saying, okay, how can we take this and then look at prevention? We can look at better diagnoses, and we can look at treatments, and then do something for them. A lot of the research out there right now is simply saying, this is what's wrong with former players, former professional football players. But what are we doing about it? What are we doing for them? And so that's really where our focus is moving forward. I'm very honored from the Department of Communication for this distinguished award. But most of all, I'm just very thankful for everything that I've learned here. Professor Phillips and I think back to communication and conflict. For my analytical mind, he had this equation. LA equals EC times M was what was written on the board when you walked in. And it was the likelihood of agreement equals effective communication times motivation. And I teach that to every single one of my player relations, coordinators, managers, and everything. Because at the end of the day, on the end of the phone, when you're talking with a former player, they need to be motivated, and you need to effectively communicate to them what we're doing. And we find a likelihood of agreement that they're interested in the study. So I really hearken back to this training frequently, and I'm very thankful for everything that I learned here, and it's just been really an honor to be back here. So thank you all.